In 2005, Phoenix would be plagued by a team of killers keeping score in a deadly game.
It was just somebody driving around and shooting anybody that they saw walking.
A spree of shootings left its citizens afraid to leave their homes.
This created a sense of terror in all of us.
And authorities baffled as to who could be responsible.
We literally did not have a single person that witnessed any of these shootings.
But what motivated this random recreational violence?
I believe he was born that way. He didn't turn into this monster.
Were these serial drive-by shooters born to kill?
There is something inside him, and it is evil.
Surrounded by the barren landscape of the Arizona desert, the city of Phoenix is a magnificent oasis. Famous for its wild vistas and desert climate, the Valley of the Sun is renowned as a font of natural beauty.
People move here because they want to be warm. People move here because they want the open skies, and people move here because they want to hike. We expect a certain amount of calmness in our life here in Phoenix because we don't have a lot of the urban situations that many of the other big cities in the world have.
In late 2005, the peace would be shattered as the city was ravaged by fear.
This city was pretty much frozen. People stayed indoors. They didn't go out, they didn't walk, they didn't allow their children out.
You became very concerned about your own personal safety because the police were telling us not to go out at night.
The community was in absolute fear. People were worried about getting gas or walking, jogging, taking their dogs out for a walk.
People were terrified to go out on the street. People were always looking over their shoulder.
But this tale of terror had inconspicuous beginnings. 6 months earlier, reports of animal shootings had begun filtering in from around the valley.
Detectives were investigating a series of animals getting killed.
One night, a person who was renting a house found that the horse adjacent to the house was lying in the field bloody, and cops were called, and this horse, poor horse, had 5 bullet wounds in her and had drowned in her own blood because it pierced her lungs.
That same night, the killer would turn his sights towards new prey. David Estrada was a keen musician with a youthful sense of adventure.
He had just turned 20, and I was so excited to get him over the teens. David had a wonderful voice, but again, I'm his mother. He loved his music, and one day I was in the kitchen, and he sings Blackbird. And I said, oh my gosh, you are fantastic, David. I mean, you've got to, pursue this. I mean, you're wonderful.
On June the 29th, David had planned to meet a friend and take a road trip.
He was wanting to meet a friend in San Francisco. They were going to go to San Diego or Mexico, but he was waiting for someone to pick him up, and he had his guitar and he had his duffel bag.
Tragically, he would never make it to his destination.
The detectives knocked on the front door, and I opened the door. They said, we found your son. And I said, well, you're detectives, is he in trouble? Let's go get him. And they said, no, we found him dead. From that point, I went out in the front yard and I told them I hated them. Don't ever talk to me that way again. I just went nuts. and I was rolling in the yard. I was hysterical.
Detectives had received a call reporting a body lying at the side of the road.
Someone who had just gotten their burgers through the drive-through window, as their headlights turned through, the headlights lit up the body on the sidewalk.
The people that called just thought that he was drunk, laying down.
Detectives quickly determined that robbery could not have been the motive for this crime, and he could not find any other paraphernalia that made him believe that there was any other good reason for it.
When he got to the mortuary, one of our friends that owns it, he said, Mrs. Estrada, he was shot once in the lung, and it penetrated 2 inches from his spine or 1 inch from his spine, and he suffocated immediately and went straight to our maker.
It was an act of seemingly senseless violence that offered investigators little in the way of clues.
There was no pattern to any of these shootings.
Detectives spent an enormous amount of energy trying to track down every single lead he could come up with that would explain the death of David Estrada. They became convinced there was no explanation to it.
We literally did not have a single person that witnessed any of these shootings.
Keeping a keen eye on the unfolding story were two local blue-collar brothers, 38-year-old Jeff Hausner and 32-year-old Dale Hausner.
Dale did not have jobs that put him in a position of power, but he did try to make the most out of the jobs that he did have.
He worked at Sky Harbor Airport as a janitor. He sold a lot of liquor out of his car trunk to a lot of people.
He actually turned the airport and his co-workers into his own little private black market for his shoplifting little business that he had going.
With Jeff unemployed, he was put to work by his younger brother as part of the shoplifting scheme.
Dale was not only younger but smaller and sort of manipulating the big boy to fight Dale's fights and pursue Dale's schemes for him.
The Hausner brothers would soon develop a deviant pastime that would leave investigators staggered. In late 2005, the city of Phoenix was plagued by a deadly spree of random shootings. Beginning with attacks on animals, events took a menacing turn when 20-year-old David Estrada was found lying dead at the side of the road. In the 6 months following David's death, the violence escalated, with shootings now totaling 13, including the slayings of animals, the destruction of property, and a second mysterious murder. Detective Cliff Jewell would soon receive a phone call that would open a new, bloody chapter.
Well, on December 29, 2005, my homicide unit was sent to a triple shooting in the downtown Phoenix area.
On that night in December, there would be 3 separate shootings, all within close proximity of one another. The stakes, it seemed, were beginning to rise in this deadly game.
Officers found the body of Marco Carrillo. He was laying here next to this building. It appeared to me that he might have been coaxed to a car, started to walk to the car, was shot actually twice in the chest. They also found Jose Ortiz, who was 2 blocks further up the road, and he was found in a similar situation. He had a gunshot wound to the center of the chest, and he was lying next to a sidewalk. The third crime scene ended up being the location where Mr. Tordai was shot.
Detective Jewell began to analyze the evidence, searching for any trace of a clue that might help to break the case.
That night, I pulled surveillance cameras for every state building so that I could find out what vehicles were moving. and it shows a car driving up to this intersection. It stops, makes a very slow turn, and then is out of camera range, but that camera picks it up, accelerating at a high rate of speed. In the footage, a cat is shown walking down the sidewalk. That cat jumps about 3 feet in the air for no apparent reason, and I believe it was at that point that that gunshot was fired, which caused that cat to jump.
Although the surveillance footage offered a vital lead, the suspicious vehicle could not be clearly identified.
At that point, it became random to me, and it was just somebody driving around and shooting anybody that they saw walking.
Analysis of further evidence recovered from the crime scene would produce a chilling discovery.
And when we compared our evidence and realized that this shooting series was connected to the homicide of David Estrada, as well as many horses and dogs that were shot, we knew that we had a serious problem. Not only that, it's not usual for people to run around and do these kind of things. We don't have people just run around randomly shooting anybody that's moving. So it was frustrating, and I knew that this was going to be a hard one to solve.
Phoenix was a city under siege, with its people prisoners in their own homes.
The volunteer Guardian Angels are now patrolling Phoenix streets, but that's not enough for some residents who are arming themselves.
Gun sales have gone up probably about 50% in the last 2 to 3 weeks.
As investigators worked around the clock, talk of the serial shooters dominated conversation.
So this created a sense of terror in all of us. If there was a water cooler talk, that was it.
People were worried about getting gas or walking, jogging, taking their dogs out for a walk.
At that point, my job was to do as much research as I could to find similar shootings. So I put out a bulletin to all the 23 cities in the Valley area asking for random shootings.
38-year-old handyman Tony Mendez and 56-year-old Vietnam veteran Reginald Remillard, two men whose murders were as yet unsolved, were now identified as being the earliest known victims of this vicious spree. Cliff Jewell began to fear the worst.
I believed that it was the same people. The MO was exactly the same. People walking in dark areas at between 10 and 2 o'clock in the morning. I just knew that they were all the same.
4 months on from the night of the triple murder, Jeff Hausner would introduce his brother Dale to his wayward friend, Sam Dieteman.
I think Dieteman had a feeling of instability from childhood. He was a child of divorce. He had been married and that fell apart. He had abandonment issues. He had control issues. So I think we already have a guy who has, some pretty serious problems.
Down on their luck, and having both suffered difficult divorces and the loss of their children, Dale and Sam quickly found a common ground.
We have two guys who've lost their wives and everything else. And surely there would be anger because they're angry that life has, not been good to them and they don't have the things other people have. So there's probably anger and resentment.
Jeff would soon loosen his ties with the group after finding a job, leaving Dale without a partner in crime.
Jeff had gotten a job working in that apartment complex as a maintenance guy, so he couldn't go out and play anymore.
Jeff also had a living girlfriend, so he broke off from Dale.
Luckily for Dale, Sam Dieteman would prove to be the perfect replacement. Just a month after this meeting, in May 2006, the fatal shootings would continue. A young woman by the name of Claudia Gutierrez Cruz was targeted on her walk home from work.
The victim was shot while walking down Thomas at approximately 6100 block.
Detective Pete Salazar was one of the officers attending the scene.
Claudia Gutierrez was transported to the hospital and died in surgery. We learned she was shot with a shotgun at close range.
With authorities still struggling to put the pieces of this intricate puzzle into place, and the number of shootings having now risen to a staggering 25, Cliff Jewell began to follow a hunch.
I always believed it was more than one person because shots were fired from both sides of the car. And it's difficult for a person to drive, look for witnesses, and shoot somebody accurately. They didn't miss. They hit everything they aimed at.
With detectives now on the hunt for a pair of perpetrators, the escalation of violence would ascend to terrifying heights before investigators got the break that they craved. In June 2006, officers were called to fires that had been started at 2 supermarkets.
There were 2 fires at 2 different stores within 8 miles of each other, within 45 minutes of each other.
That caused the sprinkler system to go and caused about $10 million worth of damage to the contents.
CCTV cameras had captured images of 2 suspicious characters at both scenes.
Because of surveillance equipment in the stores, we were able to get surveillance photos of the areas where the fire started. And in both of the surveillance images, we found the same 2 people in the store, so we were able to put a bulletin out.
After an appeal for information, investigating officer Daryl Smith would receive a tip-off identifying one of the suspects.
We got a call from someone who said they knew the person named Sammy and that he hung out at a couple bars in particular in the West Phoenix area. From that point, we went to those bars and did some surveillance, but we never found who this was. We continued surveillance in areas we thought he may be hanging out at, but we never found him.
Sam Dieteman's life had been on a downward spiral for years. Growing up, Dieteman would show little interest in school, and his adolescence was marked by a series of run-ins with the law, quickly racking up a number of minor convictions. A child of divorce whose parents were often absent, his marriage to his teenage sweetheart turned sour, leaving him homeless and estranged from his 2 young children. Dieteman soon slid into substance abuse.
Sam was 1 foot away from always being homeless, 1 drink away from not having any more to drink, drugs.
Joining Sam in seeking solace in drink and drugs, Dale Hausner had demons of his own. His family had a history of mental health issues, and the young Hausner would often complain of depression, although he would refuse and avoid offers of professional help. His father, who was frequently both distant and difficult, struggled to form any meaningful relationship with his son, and the pair would often clash, forcing Hausner from the family home at an early age.
He had been married, had 2 young sons, and this was probably a decade prior. He and his wife were driving home. She was driving.
There was a step baby and his own child. They drowned in a car accident, in an overturned car accident, and there were horrible recriminations between the married couple.
The loss of his children would spark an incident involving his now ex-wife that revealed a propensity for violence, bubbling beneath the surface.
She was driven out into the desert in her 90 by him, and she thought he was going to kill her and said that he was going to, aiming the gun, but some off-road motorists came up, and if it hadn't been for those people coming by, then she probably would have been his victim.
The final ingredient in this deadly cocktail was crystal meth.
2 guys who lost their wives and everything else, what are they going to find to make them feel like things matter? Well, the drugs do. Methamphetamine makes you feel alive. I mean, you don't have the same inhibitions. You feel so much larger than life, and you almost can't keep control over yourself. You just keep going, and you feel invincible.
The very same night the supermarkets had been set ablaze, military veteran Paul Patrick was walking to a local garage to buy cigarettes.
Paul Patrick was living with his mother and his sister at the time. He was the breadwinner, and his mother was ailing. She was a heart patient. She had many stents in her heart. And his sister would take care of the mother while Paul earned all the money.
With the serial shooter's tally of violence now totaling 33 incidents, including 12 animal shootings, 9 human casualties and 7 fatalities, Paul was about to become number 34.
I was gonna walk to the store across the street. All I heard was a car slowing down. I didn't make it. I was very sure I was shot. The pain was terrible.
Having survived the initial blast, Paul lay prone on the pavement, vulnerable and alone.
I caught the outline in his hand. There was a gun. I thought he was coming to finish me off. All I could think is, dear Lord, let this be quick.
Thankfully for Paul, the man bearing down on him with a gun was friend, not foe.
Paul, who was nearly dead on the spot, but was saved by the heroic actions of a young man named Saul Guerrero.
Guerrero was an army medic who had heard the shots and rushed to the scene.
He was there to protect me. He said, as long as I'm here, no one's gonna hurt you.
His injuries, however, have had a profound and lasting impact on his life.
Paul hovered between life and death for weeks, but his mother became the caretaker and his sister became the breadwinner and Paul became the invalid. Of course, the fact that he was even alive at all was absolutely a Hollywood miracle.
As the violence escalated, Sam Dieteman's life continued its downhill path, leaving him little choice but to turn to Dale Hausner for support, moving into his friend's apartment and sleeping on his couch.
Sam was not the kind of guy who was in charge enough of his own life to figure out, I need to earn this amount of dollars to get myself an apartment, to do grocery shopping, all of that stuff. So his life had deteriorated so much that by the time he moved in with Dale as a roommate, he was utterly and completely dependent on Dale for everything. Dale was doing everything for Sam, everything that an adult should be doing for themselves.
Their shared sense of misfortune and anger at the world was the catalyst that formed a toxic friendship. But as the investigation continued into the supermarket fires, detectives would receive a tip-off that would signal the beginning of the end for these serial shooters. In 2005, the city of Phoenix fell victim to a string of random shootings that targeted people, pets, and property, creating a climate of fear that left its citizens captive in their own homes. By the summer of 2006, with the body count ever rising, detectives began to close their net around a pair of killers who it seemed were hunting the ultimate prey. An appeal for information to identify the culprits behind 2 supermarket fires would result in investigator Darrell Smith receiving a vital tip-off.
Eventually, we did get a call. I had an extensive conversation with that person. That person was Ron Horton.
Ron was a local biker who had recognized one of the men in the CCTV footage as his regular drinking buddy, Sam Dieteman.
He told me that he was hanging out at one of these bars, the Stardust, and Sam Dieteman was one of the people that he frequents in there all the time. And one night, Sammy was in the bar with Ron, and Sammy asked him if he knew what it was like to kill somebody.
Ron looked at him and said, "What are you talking about?" "No, I've never killed anybody." And he said, "Well, I know what it feels like."
Sammy started telling him that he was the one shooting these people throughout the valley.
With investigators finally in possession of the lead they'd been so tirelessly searching for, they would set to work putting an end to the serial shooter's reign of terror, once and for all.
When I first talked to Ron on the phone, he agreed to meet with Sammy.
However, despite Ron's best efforts to coax his friend to a meeting, Dieteman stubbornly refused. Tragically, that night Robin Blasnek would become the next victim of the serial shooters, the latest in a run of unprecedented violence that numbered 47 separate incidents.
A young girl, Robin Blasnek, 22 years old, had been shot at exactly the time that he was texting back and forth with Sam.
Although it was too late to save the life of Robin Blasnek, Ron arranged a meeting with Sam the following night, and the police were determined that they would finally get their man.
Finally, the meeting did happen. They showed up at the Stardust bar, and when Sammy showed up, he was being driven to the bar by Dale Hausner. We continued the surveillance into the night.
Dale took Sam home, back to their apartment, and the surveillance continued.
A wiretap at Hausner's apartment provided investigators with a chilling insight into the minds and motivations of this pair of ruthless killers.
During the conversations on the wiretap, they were saying they were pioneers here in the area for shooting so many people.
Hausner had a need to be famous, probably because he wanted to compensate for deep and strong feelings of inadequacy and inferiority that went to the core of his personality.
They were annoyed with the media coverage because they weren't getting the number of victims correct.
They wanted to be on top. They wanted to be the ones that were recognized. You know, that it was a competition, it seemed to them. Then they started talking about Robin being killed the night before. They made some statements about that shooting, which gave us the indication, obviously, it was them that did it.
With police now in possession of the evidence they needed, they moved swiftly to get their men.
At that point, it was decided that we would make the arrest.
The green light went on. Sammy came out. He was taken down.
Dale was arrested shortly after.
Dale Hausner, wearing nothing but shorts, clearly caught unaware when tactical teams took him into custody Thursday night.
The reactions of Dale and Sammy to their arrests appeared to be no surprise. Calm, no resistance.
On executing a search of Hausner's apartment, the picture became clearer still. The evidence found inside the home of Phoenix's most wanted men was damning.
There was ammunition, and there were a whole case of lighters that matched the lighter that they found, the same color, everything, at the Walmart store.
Scattered amongst the debris of drink and drugs excess were newspaper clippings the pair had collected relating to the shootings.
There were pictures, there were books, like they were keeping trophies of each of the killings.
Keeping clippings as you know, like big game hunters in a way. Look at what I can do, so that they could relive their prowess.
Found inside a rubbish bag was a map tracking the path of their deadly pastime.
On that map, there were felt tip markings, and when we started looking at the locations of shootings, they corresponded with the dots on the map.
And in the trash bag, they found a soda can that had a .410 gauge shotgun shell in it that had been fired.
Forensic evidence would later show that the shell had been used in the previous night's slaying of Robin Blasnik. As news spread of the arrest, the people of Phoenix could at last breathe a sigh of relief, and the families of the victims could start to think about justice.
I was at work, and everybody came out and said, Rebecca, they've caught the serial killers. They said, they're on TV, they're on TV. And I went back into the lunchroom, and I looked, and I saw them, and my knees fell.
During the interrogation, investigators soon learned more about the two men they had spent so many hours pursuing.
We actually thought that Dale Hausner would be the one to talk, and that Sam Dieteman was a big muscular guy, that he would be the ringleader, so to speak.
Dale was, his attitude was, we had the wrong person. It wasn't him. He was trying to be Mr. Helpful, you know, in that type of aspect. If he knew anything, he'd certainly tell us.
I stay out of trouble for most of the part, you know, except for alcohol and a couple of little drugs every now and then. I haven't been in trouble with the law or anything, but that would just be so a kick in the ass to me, a spit in the face, that someone would use my gun and my car to go out and hurt people like that.
He didn't appear to get rattled much. It almost appeared to me as if he was having fun with it. He was toying with us.
You specifically said, quote, what about the guy who shot at 27th Avenue in Northern?
I said that was me, not Sam.
Positive. Why would you say something like that?
People say silly stuff when they're drunk. I know with Mel Gibson.
He loved every minute of that interview. He loved the game, and that's what I think he thought it was.
I keep tracking the serial killer. The other guy, he's going around shooting people.
What do you know about that particular case?
35 people shot, animals, horses, dogs, 5, 6 people dead.
The closest we got him to any involvement was the hypotheticals. Well, if my car was used, then Sam must have been taking it when I was asleep.
I'm just saying, but if he killed however many people he killed or shot or whatever, that's on him, that's not on me. So I'm not protecting anybody, so.
Okay.
He definitely believed he was smarter than all the detectives involved.
I'm not a genius or anything, but we should talk about it. Just shouldn't be this hard. I mean, maybe it is this hard to catch people, but.
Maybe the person's just really good. I mean,
could be
right?
It could be a law enforcement officer, could be Green, it could be Sam, it could be anybody. The person's got to be smart, you know, I mean, because they've been getting away with this for a long time.
Do you have any idea why you're here?
Yeah, I believe it'd be the serial shooter case.
Dieteman was quick to confess, laying bare the horrific details of the pair's crimes.
Sometimes you just see somebody and turn around and come back and get them.
You know, Sam Dieteman, he was pretty forthcoming, told us what they did, how they did it.
And then all of a sudden he's, lean back for a second. Okay. How's this?
Bang. Okay. And then he continues on the way. And what does Dale do after he fires?
He just kind of chuckles a little bit and has a gun down beside his leg there. Just kind of looked at me for a second and kept driving.
It just seemed to me like he was going along for the ride. I think it was obvious he was not the brains behind this, but Dale was.
Is it fair to say that Dale was more interested in the notoriety of this than you were? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, fair to say.
Did you
talked about it quite a bit once I started to stand there?
Sam was somewhat of a mental prisoner of Dale, and Dale was able to manipulate that and involve Sam to this level of violence.
Dieteman also laid out information relating to numerous crimes Dale had carried out previously with his brother Jeff.
Have they said anything specifically to you about being responsible for the death of another human being?
Well, Jeff has, but that's, with him, I don't know what to believe.
Okay.
He gave us information about several of the shootings that occurred prior. He told us all about Dale and Dale's brothers' activities, what they termed recreational violence.
So he was with the shooting dogs and, you say, sheep and llamas or something.
We found out that his brother Jeff and he would go out prior to meeting Sam Dieteman, and they would just pick fights with people or stab people.
Recreational violence or something, or go like beating up people.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Recreational violence. Is that what you called it? Or RVing, I guess. Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Although the killers were now behind bars, there was still one question that loomed large. What had driven these two men to kill at random? Between the summers of 2005 and 2006, Phoenix was plagued by a spree of random recreational violence. The men responsible, Dale Hausner and Sam Dieteman, had targeted people, animals and property with reckless abandon, and were motivated, it seems, by little more than the thrill of the kill. Hausner and Dieteman were arrested in connection with nearly 100 separate charges of death and destruction. Dieteman would quickly confess, while Hausner protested his innocence in the face of overwhelming evidence. In court, through Dieteman's confession, Rebecca Estrada would learn the details of her son's final moments.
The way that it was testified, and as to Sam telling us in court that Dale had said they drove up and they turned around and came back and coaxed David out to the street for directions and had the window down. And as soon as David got up to the car, Dale Hausner pulled the shotgun up and killed David with one shot to the lung.
Paul Patrick, who attended the trial every day, would be shocked by the arrogance and lack of remorse displayed by Hausner.
Sitting in court, he turned around to myself and a mother of a murder victim. Took the middle finger at us. I wanted to feed it to him.
More shocking still were the revelations surrounding the death of Robin Blasnik. Evidence obtained from the wiretap would show the true depth of the pair's depravity.
Dale Hausner is bragging about the shooting of Ms. Blasnik and making derogatory comments to her.
Dale Hausner was saying, "Help me, help me." And what he was doing is mimicking Robin because she didn't die right away. I mean, how vicious, how cruel to mimic a victim when they're begging for help. It was, and now you know what type of person you're dealing with here.
The fact that they found it amusing and laughed after this, I think also speaks to their psychological makeup, how they just didn't care about anything, nothing. They just wanted to destroy. Somehow in their perverted mind, that made them feel superior in some way.
In court, Hausner proclaimed his innocence, yet made several revealing slip-ups, including drawing comparisons between himself and the infamous killers of the past.
Dale, on the witness stand, even sort of gloried in the idea that his name, Hausner, would be sort of equated with the name of Manson, notorious serial killer.
Dale Hausner was convicted of a total of 80 separate charges, including the first-degree murders of David Estrada, Nathaniel Schaffner, Jose Ortiz, Marco Carrillo, Claudia Gutierrez Cruz, and Robin Blasnik. In 2013, having spent several years behind bars, Dale Hausner was found dead in his cell, having taken a lethal overdose. Sam Dieteman pleaded guilty to the murders of Claudia Gutierrez Cruz and Robin Blasnik and was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Jeff Hausner would receive an 18-year sentence for the stabbing of Timothy Davenport, a crime that Dieteman had revealed in confession was linked to the spree of random recreational violence. However, the question of what exactly had driven these men to such violent extremes still loomed large.
Sam Dieteman has no idea why he was involved in it. He only told us that Jeff and Dale enjoyed going out and doing random recreational violence, and that was the term they used.
I couldn't understand why. I was just a knockdown target to them. The wrong place, the wrong time.
Someone like Hausner feels so inferior, plus so angry, the only way he can gain some degree of status or notoriety is to do something horrific, which he did.
Was Sam Dieteman just a hopeless addict, dragged along for the ride? Or was he in pursuit of a new intoxicating kick?
Sam was adrift in life. Sam was waiting for someone to take control of his life. And Dale came along and took control of it, and that was very comfortable to Sam.
I don't think Dieteman would have done this without Hausner. This was Hausner's brainchild.
So were Dale Hausner and Sam Dieteman simply thrill-seekers, playing at the most dangerous game? Or were they destined to be killers?
I spent years trying to figure this out. I think the best way to describe any one of them are broken units.
Looking at Dale, I believe he was born that way. He didn't turn into this monster growing up. And looking at Sam Dieteman, in this case, he turned into a follower of Dale's and would do anything for Dale just to seem to make him happy.
I don't think any of them were born killers. I think if circumstances had been different in their lives, that you would not see them turning to murder.
I certainly believe that there was something in Dale Hausner all along that caused him, and I think the death of his two children pushed him over the edge.
A traumatic event could serve as a trigger, but it's a trigger to release what is already in the individual. It's not causative, but it could certainly serve as a trigger. But he was filled with an enormous amount of anger, an amount of hostility, Hausner was in particular.
He enjoyed the bloodiness of it. There is something inside Dale, and it is evil. I think he could have fought it if he wanted to.
For those who had their loved ones so unexpectedly taken from them, nothing could ever compensate for the shattering losses they suffered.
Been a lot of years without him, and he had a full life to lead.
Fond memories, however, will always remain.
He was just the most darling boy, and he would put his little hands on my face and he'd say, "Mama, I just love your face. I love your face." And those precious little hands to hold, and he was just the most enjoyable person that was ever put on this earth as far as I'm concerned.
For Paul Patrick, although the scars may never heal, his determination to defy the odds will live on as a fitting tribute to those that were not so fortunate.
I am not going to be beaten. I'm certainly not by those broken units.